The story commenced typically as a narrative of an unfaithful spouse might. I was en route to the airport for a business excursion when a call informed me that my presence was unnecessary, so I redirected my private aircraft to the hangar where I stored it. Confident in its use in the days ahead, I simply parked it and departed. I phoned my superior and secured approval to take the remainder of the day off. Nearing 4 p.m., I anticipated arriving home by about 5:30 p.m., aligning with my wife's usual return from her job. Opting to surprise her with a dinner invitation, I did indeed catch her off guard, yet she stunned me profoundly. Upon learning of my departure, she and a companion had arranged an evening out, leaving work early to initiate their rendezvous. Spotting her vehicle and another unknown one in our garage raised my suspicions, and I entered our home discreetly. Echoing the common tales, I encountered a pair of shoes by the back entrance, a blouse on the stairs to the bedrooms, and various garments leading to the guest room. The door stood open, revealing them unclothed. He was near the bed, while my cherished wife was engaged in fellatio. His moans conveyed his delight, a feeling I recognized. The walk from the garage had somewhat prepared me for this scenario, yet I remained stunned and incredulous for a moment. Contrary to what some might assume, I found no pleasure in this. My wife, whom I had loved, trusted, respected, and admired, was gleefully engaged with another man. I began formulating a response, restraining myself from retrieving my firearm to confront this lascivious intruder. When he opted not to conclude in her mouth and withdrew, that jolted me from my stupor. He instructed June, my spouse, to position herself on the bed as I cleared my throat. Holy crap! Why are you here? No, June, the question is, what are you doing here? And who is this lowlife? The lover's face shifted from immense satisfaction to sheer terror. He's your husband. I thought you said he was away on an overnight flight today. I met her eyes for the first time in our acquaintance, an act one had previously avoided for various reasons, which I would later explain. I directed her seize his penis and come with me downstairs, retrieving his trousers from the floor. I sought his mobile phone, extracting it from a leather case on his belt as she clutched his genitals and stood. His pants were flung to the floor carelessly as I led them to the living room. Scrolling through his phone contacts, I found one labeled home and pressed call, questioning him. What's your name, Mark? He responded tentatively, uncertain of my motives. A woman answered on the third ring, evidently recognizing the caller ID. Hi, Mark, I just got home, so don't even start with your late excuses, or else it was evident Mark had not fabricated his alibi. Mark won't be spinning tales tonight. Maybe I should clarify why Mark isn't calling from his own phone. Don't fret, he's unharmed. For now, I remarked with a chuckle. You might consider visiting my home, where I've just discovered Mark with his penis in my wife's mouth. What the she started, pausing in shock. After a moment, she continued, That deceitful jerk, who are you? I sensed something amiss, but this revelation, are you sure? Who's the fool who informed this double dealer that I never want to see him again? Never mind, I'll handle it myself. Where are you located? I didn't claim these were rational thoughts, just a series of words, but who am I to judge? I urged her to calm down and then provided her with my address, merely a 10-minute drive from her according to her claim. We'll conduct a proper introduction when you get here, and please stay composed and don't rush. We'd hate to make Mark a widower, after all. If someone is to avoid suffering here, it definitely isn't you. After hanging up, I turned my attention back to the two hesitant nudists in my living room. Stand there, by the window, I directed. I'd rather not, Mark objected. June simply headed to the spot I had indicated, tugging him along by the hand, inducing painful yelps from him. Ouch, June, stop that. She won't let you go until I permit it, I told them. There are sides to me you don't know about. Why, even June is in the dark. I let a slightly wicked smile show on my face. It seems we have some time before your wife gets here, so allow me to share a bit about myself. I'm not worried about you revealing any of this. Their expressions shifted from confusion to mild fear. Until I was about 18, my life was completely normal. When you look at me, nothing really stands out. I'm of average height, generally average build, possibly a bit on the thin side, with brown hair, brown eyes, and a medium complexion. I'm not especially good looking, but not unpleasant to look at either, wouldn't you say? It was about that age I realized that by maintaining eye contact for a few moments, I could instill a thought in their head. These thoughts could be as benign as your name is now Bert, or as grave as if you don't obey me completely, you will endure a burning so severe it would make hell seem like a cool breeze. This latter concept is what I've just placed in June's mind. As you might guess, I've really enjoyed this power, particularly after perfecting it. I think back to a bully in high school on our graduation day. He thought it was entirely appropriate to expose his rear to everyone, thanks to an idea I'd implanted. I've employed my ability for various jokes and to get out of minor legal troubles. Sometimes, if a young lady turned me down rudely, she would suddenly reconsider and partake in acts that would shame a pornographic actress. That should give you some insight into my abilities. On one occasion, while with a general's daughter from the nearby Air Force base, her mother caught us. She started to scold me, but then I saw she was quite appealing, and I persuaded her to join in. My mother had her thighs tightly clenching my head, reaching the climax of bliss with loud cries. When the old general walked in, I hadn't noticed his arrival because his daughter was gleefully gyrating on my lap and his wife was caught in ecstasy on my face. He swiftly removed his daughter from me, extracted his wife, and flung me from the bed before I could lock eyes with him. He handled me roughly, jumbling my thoughts so I couldn't infiltrate his mind during the intense questioning and yelling that followed. I admitted that it was not his wife's fault. I clarified that I possessed the skill to penetrate someone's consciousness with just a glance and implant a suggestion, similar to hypnosis but far more powerful. It wasn't hard for anyone, pun not intended, to see that Homeland Security might see my talents as valuable for interrogations or to send prisoners back to gather more intelligence. I could instill the belief that the promised 72 virgins in paradise for their martyrdom were in fact 72 demonic succubi, ready to torment them. This belief made them extremely cooperative, dreading these beings would sap their vitality in a prolonged, agonizing process. I could make them believe these fiends would materialize within a minute, unless they confessed everything they knew. By suggesting these creatures were magical, I convinced them that the succubi would materialize as soon as they acted against our interests or failed to inform us of their group's plans. Therefore, I negotiated a deal with the authorities for a 6-figure salary. They trained me to fly and provided me with a small plane, which I now own. They handle the fuel and maintenance costs as long as I employ it for their tasks. I made it clear that I wouldn't work overseas unless it was my choice, as I sought a conventional life. Hence, my official role became known as troubleshooter, which accounts for any abrupt work-related trips. As per the terms of the agreement, I was to cease employing my abilities for my own entertainment or enjoyment, now being a highly classified resource. Gradually, I discovered enjoyment in the presence of individuals who truly appreciated me, not swayed by my manipulation. My powers were never utilized on June or several other women I dated prior to her for the same motive I sought a companion who would love, respect, and trust me for my true self. With June, I've come to understand that this was not the situation. We were together for 18 months before our marriage, and in 2 months we were to mark our second wedding anniversary. I believed we were content, or at least I was. I gave June a stern look. Discussions about starting a family had even begun. With no need for her to repeat her tale, I awaited the arrival of Mark's wife to reveal the full scope of their affair. Meanwhile, I aimed to gather some photographic proof, directing her to passionately kiss and lick his chest while I took photos. After capturing around 12 images, I heard a car pull up in the driveway. I instructed her to stop and move back to her position by the window. I set my camera down and proceeded to the door, just as she was about to ring the bell. I opened the door and greeted her. "I presume you are Mark's wife. I'm Cliff Derringer, and I believe that's your husband Mark, over there with my devoted wife June." "I wish I could say it's a pleasure to meet you, Cliff." "I'm Darlene," she replied, eyeing the undressed pair. She walked up to them, looked at Mark, who averted his eyes, then positioned herself in front of June, who seemed suddenly fascinated by the carpet. Ashamed, she struck Mark on the face hard enough to turn his head sharply. "Have you no self-respect? Could you not at least wear some clothes?" "Darlene," that was my insistence. I had them remain naked and in front of the window so perhaps they might feel some embarrassment and regret their deeds, not merely fear being caught. Look at her, she still clings to him. What sort of? "Shameless woman, did you marry?" Cliff again, my fault. "He's easier to manage this way." Observe June gripped his hand firmly. "Ooh, why would you do that?" "What have I done to you, Mark?" "Are these all your trivial inquiries, June?" Loosen the grip but maintain it. I briefly met Mark's eyes, that was all it took. "Now I want both of you to reveal the truth. Don't soften anything to appear better, and tell us everything, no exceptions." "Let's start with you, Mark. What's the backstory here? We first encountered each other in high school," Mark started, as the idea of this affair preceding our marriages dawned on both Darlene and me. "We began dating shortly after the second semester of our senior year in January. June and I didn't really know each other until we were seated close in the latter part of a science class we both attended. We instantly connected, becoming exclusive almost right away, and spent as much time together joyfully as we could. It was shortly after Easter break, late in March, that we first got intimate in the back seat of my car. From then we were inseparable, rarely speaking harshly to one another. We were deeply in love. Then she disappeared. It was May 2nd, a day I'll never forget. I went to her house to pick her up for school, and her father told me she had gone and wasn't coming back. He told me to leave and never to ask about her again. I was devastated, unable to fathom what I had done to upset her. Nonetheless, I ignored his demands. I returned multiple times, desperate to learn where June had gone, why she left, who she was with. Any detail that might help me reconnect with her. I was sure I could mend our relationship as my affection was profound. Her parents disclosed nothing and even threatened to call the police if I persisted. Undeterred, I continued to visit, and they indeed called the police. They reported she no longer wanted to see me and wanted me to cease my intrusions. The police took me to the station for a long discussion on the dangers of unrequited love and risky obsessions. When my parents came, the officer released me with a firm admonition that I'd be arrested if I returned. Heartbroken, isolated, and thwarted at every turn, I mechanically finished my last month of senior year and graduated. Subsequently, I joined the military for a 4-year stint to distract myself from my grief and loneliness. In the armed forces, I encountered Darlene and we got married, believing that June was out of my life forever. 6 months ago, upon my discharge, we relocated here. Roughly 3 months ago, I bumped into June at a grocery store. We met for coffee shortly thereafter to reconnect, and that's when she revealed her actual situation to me. We began seeing each other every few weeks, and though it was purely platonic, there was some light-hearted flirting involved. Nothing further happened until a fortnight ago when I left work early and stopped by one afternoon while you were out of town until later that night. Things progressed rapidly, and suddenly we found ourselves undressed, panting from an intense encounter. We vowed it would not recur, yet it did, a week later, right here in this house. Today marked just the third instance. We deeply regret our actions and did not intend to hurt either of you. All right, June, your turn. Your story starts similarly. We met during our final year of high school, were together for a few months, and then faced our impending graduation. Everything seemed idyllic until one particular day. I realized I might be pregnant after missing my cycle, and a test confirmed my suspicions. I was crying on my bed with the test in hand when my mother walked in, wanting to know why I was upset. In my haste, I attempted to hide the test, but she saw it. She was upset yet. She consoled me until my father came home. He was enraged initially. When he slightly calmed, he demanded I get an abortion and insisted on silence about this, particularly from Mark. I resisted, insisting on making my own decision. This sparked another argument. Eventually, we compromised I would have the baby and then give it up for adoption, but I was to tell no one. That night, I left for my Aunt Janice's place in South Dakota, a 7-hour drive, under strict orders to sever all ties with friends and family, except for my parents. I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to Mark. This was a strict ultimatum from my father. If the truth came out, he would disown me. Are you asking if I have a child out there that I've kept a secret? No, June answered, her gaze lowered. I stayed with Aunt Janice, finished the school year there. I couldn't attend school in the fall as I would be noticeably pregnant, breaking our deal. As my pregnancy became visible, I was restricted to her house, isolated from any contact with friends or family, except my parents. I was so upset with them that I hardly spoke to them. My life was reduced to just my aunt, me, and my unborn baby. I think Depression I was experiencing contributed to a miscarriage at 6 months. The loss devastated me even more. After recuperating, I came back home to find Mark had joined the army and his family had moved away. They had only stayed here until his graduation, as his father had found a job in Ohio. Overwhelmed by everything, I remained at home for months until my father encouraged me to find a job for a new perspective. I started working at Dr. Jensen's office and began dating again. After about a year, I met you, Cliff. Our life together was blissful, and you helped me move past Mark until we encountered each other at the supermarket, as he narrated. Oh, isn't that just sweet and innocent? Darlene remarked sarcastically, a poignant tale of young love, longing and betrayal of those you both pledged to hold dear. If this is how you show love, perhaps I should retaliate by hitting you where it hurts. So the two of you were deeply involved in your affair, weren't you? Have either of you cooled your youthful passions enough to contemplate the future of this relationship? Were you thinking of leaving us for one another, or what? No, Cliff. June immediately responded, I love you. I didn't want to leave you. Mark appeared taken aback that he was not her primary choice, but kept quiet. So did you expect me to be fine with your affair, or did you think you could keep it hidden and have everything? Cliff pressed on. I didn't want to cause you pain. I was uncertain about how long Mark would remain, considering he and Darlene have a son. So you were fine with deceiving me, giving Mark what should exclusively belong to me, just because he was present. That implies this affair might continue indefinitely if Darlene and I were naive enough to overlook it, and he was willing enough to engage with 2 women. This indicates you are deeply involved, both emotionally and physically, and if he chose to leave Darlene, you'd abandon me immediately. Is that accurate, June? I never viewed it that way, June countered. That interpretation makes it seem like I wouldn't leave you unless Mark left Darlene. It sounds like I don't truly love you. What's your take, Darlene? Am I a committed wife or what? I'm not in a much better situation, Darlene chimed in. Cliff and I had been together for around a year when I got pregnant with Joey, our son. Now I'm questioning if that was the sole reason he married me. He evidently still harbored feelings for June. I noticed surprise on Mark's face when June stated she didn't want to leave you. Mark, share your thoughts when she mentioned that, Cliff prompted. Mark started. Cautiously, I hadn't fully processed it because I don't want to leave you and Joey, Darlene. Yet, part of me hoped for a fresh start with June. It slightly hurt when she proclaimed her love and dedication to you in that way. I guess I believed those emotions should be reserved for me. Since I hadn't met Cliff, it was simpler to disregard his presence and envision June and I rekindling our former relationship. I'm conflicted because I still have feelings for you, Darlene. I suppose they love each other more than they love us, Cliff deduced. June and Mark began to protest his remark but halted, recognizing the potential truth in his words. June attempted to explain, my love for Cliff is mature, based on trust. It's comfortable. With Mark, it's the fiery love of youth, the initial love that was never fully realized. Recall our wedding vows. We vowed to love and cherish each other, me forsaking all others. That vow meant I'd love only you, and you'd love only me. I don't recall an allowance for a bit of youthful passion. So, which other vows have you broken? Have you been loyal to me since our marriage? Yes, that warrants further explanation. Have you engaged in anything more than flirting? Not since we got married. What about when we were dating? Initially, when we began dating, we weren't exclusive. When I started seeing you, I was still seeing the man I dated before you approached me. Bill and I were still intimate, until you and I agreed to exclusivity, and you were aware of Bill. However, I didn't reveal several instances when Bill and I met just for intimacy. He was quite upset when I ended it with you, and I felt remorseful, so you started misleading and betraying me nearly from the beginning. We met up just 5 times, Cliff, and those moments meant nothing to me. They mean a great deal to me. It shows you misled me and deprived me of time we could have shared. No, Cliff, those were merely on nights when you were away on business. We wouldn't have been together anyway. That suggests you had to inform him when it was safe, and that you initiated these meetings. Even if you convinced yourself he was the eager one, you desired it too. That sounds like intentional cheating to me. It wasn't like that. Then clarify how it wasn't like that. June bowed her head silently, embarrassed. When did you ultimately end it with him, and why? The last time was 4 months before we married. It was a goodbye as he was moving to a new city for work. Before that, our final meeting was only 2 months after we began dating. It might still have continued whenever a suitable excuse presented itself, right? Bill, next week marks the anniversary of our first date. How about we see each other when Cliff is away next Tuesday? Or Bill, the anniversary of Cliff and I is in 3 days, and he will be out late. Perhaps you could come and keep me company until he gets back. Oh, it's merely leftovers for Cliff. June, you're becoming quite the libertine. Is there anything else you wish to admit? June's head snapped up and her eyes ignited with fury as the libertine remark hit home. Acknowledging her behavior was indeed reflective of a libertine, shame washed over her, and her head fell. I need to admit another thing, Cliff. During my bachelorette party, I got really drunk. A male stripper was hired to give a private performance, and things intensified. Jenny, my maid of honor, got involved when they gathered funds for another dance. And by then we were both quite stirred. In front of Jenny, I performed oral sex on him. I now recognize that trusting her was a mistake. She always pursued her own pleasure, disregarding others and their marital commitments. But it seems they weren't as significant to you as I thought, as important to me. I'm deeply sorry, Cliff. It turns out I picked a genuinely faithful, loving mate. Let's see how well you paraphrased. Darlene, Mark, has there been any time since you two have been together that you haven't disclosed to Darlene that you're not proud of? Have you been involved with someone other than my beloved wife in a way you wouldn't have been if she were around while we were dating? I once went out with another woman, but we weren't committed yet. I have flirted from time to time over the years, but I haven't done anything that deeply embarrasses me. It wasn't premeditated, it just occurred. We simply lost control once, and after getting away with it the first time, it happened again. It made us both feel young, innocent, and in love like we were in high school. We truly didn't want to cause you both any pain. I'm sincerely remorseful too, Darlene, but apologies don't satisfy the hunger. I suddenly declared, Darlene, I believe that Mark didn't plan for this, just as he stated. However, my wife appears to exhibit a pattern of conduct that suggests she finds it hard to stay loyal. I'm not the kind of husband who overlooks such actions, and I've made that quite evident to you. My anger now was clear, erupting in a loud outburst. Was our private life not gratifying enough for you? We were intimate no less than 3 times a week, often 4. How frequently did I feel the residue of your escapade with Mark? Even if you cleaned up, it still felt like remnants, didn't it? I still ended up with something that was once solely mine, or perhaps I just wasn't big enough for you. Was that it? His doesn't look much larger, is that it, or did you just relish the thrill of another? That leads us to think of you as easy. So which is it? Did you crave a different experience or a bigger one because I wasn't sufficient? It was simply an extension of a youthful affair that never ended. You can't fathom how much I wished he had come back before we wed, or not at all. I love you, Cliff. She was weeping now. I'm unsure if she was starting to grasp the extent of damage she has done to our relationship, or if she believed the tears would make me more compassionate towards her wants and needs. Maybe it was that she now felt she earned the label of a libertine, as she had not seen her actions in that light before. So did I not provide enough attention? I'm not away more than once, sometimes 2 nights a week, but I often return home late a few more nights. Whenever I'm away, I always organize a special evening for us upon my return. I have aimed to make our life together as satisfying as it could be. Wasn't that enough for you? It was more than I could have ever asked for, Cliff. This wasn't about you and me, it was about Mark and me and our regrettable liaison. You've done nothing wrong. You were a wonderful husband. I must have been excessively perfect, and you interpreted my caring nature as an anything-for-you disposition, even overlooking your disloyalties. Did you regard me solely as a financial resource, or as someone who provides a home which you could abandon for a better option? Am I merely a stepping stone to your subsequent romance? No, Cliff. My reason for marrying you was my love for you and my desire to share our lives together. I still feel the same. I wish this catastrophe had never happened. It's curious that you refer to this as a catastrophe, considering you brought him into our sanctuary, our refuge of sanity in this chaotic world, and betrayed me right here. That surely shows where your respect truly lies, and it's not with me. You brought your lover into our home, a place filled with our memories and dreams for the future. A catastrophe occurs once, June, not repeatedly with more anticipated. This wasn't a simple error, it was intentional deception. You behave with the morality of a stray cat in mating season. So June, what's our next step? Cliff, is there a possibility for us? I truly love you, she said, looking intently into my eyes through her tears, her gaze pleading. Over time, I might manage to forgive you. I know I won't ever forget. It'll take a while before I can begin to trust you again. Are you prepared for me to keep an eye on you constantly, checking on your activities and companions? It's evident that you can't see Mark anymore. I can't promise anything, but for us to have any potential, you need to make that choice immediately. I could force your fidelity with a psychological threat that might linger in your mind, but I prefer not to manipulate you as that would breed resentment, and I want to be with someone who genuinely wishes to be with me. I'm seeking someone who will stay loyal to me, and right now I doubt your ability to do so. I'm not just talking about Mark, I question whether you can remain committed to me as a spouse should. You need to convince me that you are worthy of the heartbreak you've caused. This must be a genuine desire of yours, and you must want it more than anything or anyone else. I'm not fully convinced I want to try again after uncovering all the deceit and betrayal tonight, so it's uncertain if we can make things work. Mark and any other man are now irrelevant. You will be scrutinized because you violated trust and showed nearly complete disregard for me and for us. You truly need to make this work. Now, it's decision time. Is it him or me? She paused, anxiously shifting her gaze between Mark's face and mine. This is a crucial choice, Cliff. Your hesitation says a lot. It indicates that you don't love me more than him, and even if you chose me, it may not be long before you start doubting whether you made the right decision. Then, one night when you're alone and angry with me, your spiteful side would take over, and soon Mark would be receiving calls from the wife who fails to keep promises to me. The same wife who professes her love to my face would betray me the moment I look away. Cliff, please give me another opportunity, she implored, moving toward me but forgetting she was still linked to him, pulling her undressed lover halfway across the room until she realized and stopped, collapsing to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Please, Cliff, please, you made your bed, now you have to lie in it. I think you've clung to him long enough, time to. Let go. Her hand released, and Mark exhaled a sigh of relief as blood flow returned to his constrained arm. Darlene, have you decided what to do about your marriage yet? No, Cliff, I haven't. She then turned to the nude man in the room, addressing Mark. It seems your high school floozy will be free soon. Do you want to stay with your son and me, or try it with her? It will be as Cliff said. I no longer trust you, and you need to show me you're worth keeping. Assuming you want to, like he mentioned, you need to really want to stay with me. I apologize, Darlene. Darlene sobbed, covering her face with her hands and sinking into the sofa. All right, I declared. Now we truly understand everyone's intentions, right, dear? Some men, when confronted with such a crisis, might draw a firearm and eliminate his spouse and her paramour. I halted to assess their expressions, which justified the theatrical pause. Some might assault both of you. Others might embarrass you by displaying your naked images on a billboard or online. Yet I am different from the majority. They both seemed a bit relieved. Nevertheless, you too will face consequences. June, remember, due to the airplane and the nature of my employment, my career necessitated that you sign a prenuptial agreement with me. Your initial punishment will be receiving merely $2,000 or $3,000 from our shared assets. That's all. Had you remained a bit longer, perhaps a car would have been yours, but you failed to even reach our second year together. The prenup specified that infidelity by either of us would result in $10,000 or 5% of our entire wealth, whichever is less for each year of fidelity. After a decade we split evenly, but the airplane is of course excluded. You may keep our bed where you were unfaithful, because I certainly have no desire for it next. She lifted her hand and tenderly wrapped her fingers around his genitals. I directed her to tug, and as she did, they appeared to seamlessly detach. Naturally, they did not, but they were unaware of this. June yelled and flung the fictitious parts to the ground, as I had convinced them of this scenario in their minds. Just before your second penalty, which also starts his, you made him lose his fertility. He will neither father children nor engage in sexual activities, and this fact you must endure. His further punishment involves his organ becoming as thin as a pencil and merely 2 inches long when excited. You surely didn't think you could carry on with your escapades without facing any consequences, did you? Mark inhaled sharply as he saw his organ shrink in size while I described it. Darlene looked at us as though we were senseless, and to her, indeed we were. She started to say something, but a quick look and a wink from me stopped her. "Come with me to the kitchen," I murmured. We left the room as they contemplated what had just occurred. In essence, I possess remarkable hypnotic powers, and they are entirely persuaded that he is now stripped of any reproductive capabilities. I know this appears harsh, but he deliberately and consciously betrayed his wife and child with another man's spouse, an action I am resolved he should never repeat, and this approach is the most effective I have for ensuring it. As you see, though I have inflicted no genuine physical harm upon them, I must admit the punishment is fitting for the offense. She flashed a slight grin. Is that a smile? I truly didn't expect to see one today. Yes, it seems somewhat surprising. It's a welcome smile, please maintain it. Listen, this will be a tough period for you and Joey. Promise me if you need anything or just want to talk, you'll reach out to me. I don't normally partake in vindictive acts like this. I'm not a vindictive person. I love children and am keen to support you. Who will help you? I'm just a man with a demanding job. I will bury myself in my work for a while until I can come to terms with it. Suddenly, you've gone from a full family to a single parent with a young child, a significant shift. My life won't alter as dramatically. I'll cope. I hadn't thought that far ahead. Wow, I have some major life changes to make, but my family is supportive and I'll get by with their help. I'm unsure whether I should evict Mark or if Joey and I should move. It might be best for Joey to remain, but I can't afford that house. Could you speak to your parents about it? They understand your circumstances better than I do and can think more clearly than either of us right now. Indeed, I'll handle that. Simultaneously, I will make it clear to him that his presence is no longer acceptable at your residence, in clear terms. I'm set to kick Jun out as soon as you leave. I'm genuinely interested in helping you and Joey. It may even act as a form of therapy for me as well. Look, there are no strings attached. I'm not that type of individual either. We both heard raised voices from the family room and returned to find the two deeply engaged in a heated argument. Why did you remove my testicles? I can't believe you would do that. He forced me. I had no other option. I didn't witness him pressuring you. I did see you remove them. Enough. Both of you, I intervened. This situation is the result of your own actions. You received what was coming to you, Mark. My intention was to prevent you from disrupting more marriages, and now you won't. Your deeds have undoubtedly made quite a few divorce lawyers very happy, but have left your spouses and child profoundly disturbed. This is the first time since our marriage that I'm truly thankful we don't have a child. Cliff, please think it over. I'll try harder. You turned what ought to have been an easy decision, assuming your love for me, as you say, into a complex problem. Yet you hesitated. A part of you still wished to keep both relationships going, a setup that might fit you adulterers. There. But it's unworkable for me or Darlene. We recognize that for any relationship to thrive, it must encompass not just love, but also trust and respect. Maybe you do love us as you think, but we perceive no remaining respect or trust. The enormity of what happened finally overwhelmed her, and she broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I think she was feeling some of my pain. Now, I hope you both find the happiness with each other that you were expecting, because you're getting the chance to see that. Darlene and I are done with you for good. I gave them a quick look and instructed them to forget what I had revealed about my profession and my persuasive recommendations. I told them to remember the day's events, except that he was missing his testicles. When I walked in, she held his testicles in her mouth, and I kicked him in the rear, causing him to fall onto her, thus closing her mouth and cutting them off. His lack of testicles caused his penis to wither and become non-functional. She would still bear responsibility for his loss. I also told them to candidly admit to their actions whenever questioned, and Mark should not obstruct their divorce. Darlene said, Joey needs to be picked up from the babysitter, and I need to return home. Mark, I'm unsure where you'll sleep tonight, but it definitely won't be with me. Don't come home tonight. Once you find somewhere to stay, we can discuss moving your things out of here. Farewell, Mark. With that, she took her purse and exited the house. "Darlene," wait, Mark yelled, beginning to follow her out the door before he recalled his state of undress. He then turned and dashed upstairs to where his clothes were. Half a minute later, he was mostly dressed and rushing out as the door shut. I said, "Don't just sit there, June, dress up and leave. You have 10 minutes or I'm throwing your bare rear onto the front yard." Glancing at my watch, I remarked, "Time's ticking, you better move." She looked at me, her eyes pleading once more. Seeing no sympathy, she slowly stood and headed upstairs to pack. Minutes later, she descended the stairs, slowly sniffling. "Where should I go? What am I to do?" "You should have considered that before your affair. You are no longer my responsibility." It hurt me to say that, to feel that way, and to come across as an indifferent brute when I said it. There has already been enough pain today. It had to be done this way. It will allow for a cleaner break for both of us. I had your father come to pick you up. He is expected to arrive any second. "Oh dear, what have you informed him of? Did you explain the reason?" "No, I haven't divulged anything. I'll leave that to you. After all, it was your doing. I asked him to come pick you up since you can no longer stay here and need a new place to live. Once you are settled in, contact me to organize the retrieval of your remaining items. Cliff, do you not love me anymore?" I inhaled deeply before replying, "Yes, I do love you, and that is why this is so distressing. I have loved you with all my heart. It's not possible to simply shut off such deep feelings. I can't reside with you any longer, and upon reflection, I believe you wouldn't be content living with me either. It would mean always being reminded of this difficult day. It might initially seem more painful, but distancing ourselves for a while could be healthier. This way we can start to heal and move forward separately. Tomorrow I'll contact a lawyer to initiate the divorce proceedings. With our prenuptial agreement, the process should be straightforward. Please don't fight this, it will just extend the break." Suffering for both of us, she looked at me with tearful, puffy eyes and sniffled. It seemed she was pondering my words. I wasn't sure if she was beginning to understand or still figuring out how to change my decision. When the doorbell sounded, I anticipated Jim, my father-in-law, to be there when I opened the door, but he had brought Mary, her mother, with him. June rushed to her and started crying openly. "If you've done anything to hurt her, I promise you'll regret ever being born." He was the kind of man who remained calm yet made such a threatifully and calmly, which made it more intimidating than if he had shouted. "Jim, I haven't harmed her. Her suitcases are right there, and she'll explain what she's done when she stops weeping. You're evicting her. What did she do to warrant this?" I preferred that she tell you, as recounting it myself would be too agonizing. June and her mum had already started toward the car. Jim stooped to lift her suitcases, watching me closely all the while. When he stood up, he raised an eyebrow, then turned and left. I closed the door, walked over to my armchair, and collapsed into its welcoming, soft cushions. That's when I broke down, just like my marriage had. I cried myself to sleep, awakened the next morning by the sunlight shining through the bay window. It was time to shower and begin the next chapter of my life. I called my boss and took the day off, then I called the lawyer. I took care of everything necessary, including severing our joint accounts and opening new ones. The divorce was completed quickly and without her opposition. A month later, without any communication from Darlene, I contacted her. She and Joey had moved back in with her parents, who had plenty of room in their home and hearts, and they had listed their previous home for sale. Mark and June managed to secure a small apartment together, although Darlene noticed they often argued. One day Darlene asked if the hypnotic suggestion I had made to Mark and June about his inadequacy was permanent, and whether he would always believe he was deficient below the waist. Never underestimate the power of denial. I laughed. After a few years and possibly several doctors confirming he does have something there, he might begin to doubt his belief and abandon the illusion. Or perhaps not. Such topics are not commonly discussed among men. Now that the pain has lessened, I feel a bit sorry for him. Did it really need to be done? I simply smiled. I became an honorary uncle to Joey and maintained a casual relationship with benefits with Darlene. Every couple of weeks we would gather. I desired a closer bond with her, but she was not interested, likely due to some bad experiences, I assume. At Joey's 4th birthday celebration, there was an unfamiliar face present. I inquired with Darlene if she had begun seeing someone new, to which she replied affirmatively. I mentioned that I certainly did not wish to impose, and she knew how to reach me if needed. She ended up marrying him 7 months afterward. I interpreted the presence of this new individual at the event as a cue for me to re-enter the dating scene, and that's exactly what I did. I've been dating this delightful blonde I encountered at the mall for a few months now, and I am learning to trust her. Due to June's betrayal, I am more cautious than I would prefer. I absolutely hate that, but Dom gets it. She's a remarkable woman. It's been 14 months since the significant incident, and I bumped into Mark at the grocery store. Ironically, he shared that June had been disloyal to him too after a couple of months because he couldn't satisfy her, leading him to dismiss her, much like I had. I felt a bit of sympathy for him, as I completely understood his situation. So Mark, did you learn anything? What do you mean? Are you going to cheat or sleep with another man's wife again? I wouldn't. Even if it were possible, my ex-wife continuously harbors anger towards me and restricts my visits with Joey more than she should. My girlfriend with whom I was unfaithful betrayed me as well, and now I'm alone, eating frozen dinners every night. Sometimes I can't even masturbate. I often question why I keep going. Cliff, I genuinely regret my involvement in the affair. You need to persist because Joey needs you despite a few misguided actions. Let me tell you, I know some individuals who officially don't exist, and they can perform some extraordinary acts, but you'll never see them. I can't promise anything, but I'll see what they can do. For you this Friday night, take some whiskey home, drink until you pass out, ideally in your bed, so you don't see them if they pull it off. When you wake up, you might find a pleasant surprise in your pants. You must never speak of this to anyone. Promise me, I promise I'll stay silent good, and I make you this promise if I find out you cheated on your lady again or slept with another man's wife, apart from your own, I'll come over and cut them off again. Do you comprehend? Yes, that's not an issue, I promise. Thanks a lot, Cliff. If this works out, I'll owe you greatly. If you ever need anything, I'm here for you. I mean it, buddy. You have no idea how much I've suffered. Let's hope they can help you before you resort to something extreme for me. Remember, keep silent. I gestured warningly at him as I left. I had already hinted to him that when he awoke on Saturday, his anatomy would be restored, and he'd likely suffer from a significant hangover. It will be worthwhile. About 6 weeks later, I was at the mall one day and ran into Jim and Mary. I was about to simply nod and keep walking, but Jim had other ideas. Cliff, may I have a moment? I nodded back. It's your moment. Mary and I wish to express our apologies for what occurred. I feel somewhat responsible because of our reaction to her pregnancy. Had we acted differently? Well, you understand. We just want you to know we're sorry and hope you can forgive our part in this. Jim and Mary, you didn't coerce her into anything. True, you could have supported her better, but I realize you thought you were doing the right thing. Hindsight is always clear. I hold no grudges against you, so from my perspective, there's no need for apologies. Thanks, Cliff. We're grateful for that. I'd also like to note that we've sent her to a therapist. Initially, it was to help her cope with what occurred between you two, and then what she did with Mark. She's been dealing with a lot of internal conflicts, but she's seeking help to resolve them. For her sake, we'd appreciate it if you could attend one of her sessions. This isn't her idea, it comes from her therapist. She doesn't need to be present unless you want her to be. I realize it involves reopening old wounds, but it could support her healing process, which is extremely important to both Mary and me. Could you consider doing this for us? I paused for a moment to observe their genuine, hopeful looks. They were good people, and like all well-intentioned individuals, they made mistakes. I've been guilty of that as well. Yet their friendship remained significantly meaningful to me. I exhaled. Tell me the time and place. I'll try my best to make it. Their faces lit up with hope as they replied. Thank you so much, Cliff. We'll let you know as soon as she schedules it with Dr. Faraday. Her usual appointment is on Thursday tomorrow. Could you join next Thursday at 4? As a professional, I made arrangements as best as I could. Luckily, I managed to join her there. I walked into the office 5 minutes early, and she was already sitting on the couch in the waiting area. She greeted me with a warm but cautious smile, suggesting she was uncertain about her role in my life and did not wish to assume too much. I sat in a chair a few feet away, feeling a bit awkward. Hello, Cliff, she said. You look well. I noticed she was dressed in a coordinated navy skirt and jacket over a white blouse, fastened just a few inches down from her neck, subtly outlining the figure I was familiar with yet disclosing nothing. It was a decidedly professional appearance, a change for her. June, you're looking as well as I've ever seen you. This doctor seems to be benefiting you. Thanks for coming today. It means a lot to me and my folks. Just don't set your expectations high. This isn't a step toward reconciliation. I can't continue in that way. I'm aware. I braced myself for this, although I'd be untruthful if I claimed a small part of me didn't still hold a sliver of hope for us. I take it you know about Mark and me, yes, and please don't regard this as harsh, but I have to say I wasn't shocked. You've always had an intense sexual drive, and with your inability to be with Mark, you seemed like you were just waiting to explode. I get it, and Doctor Faraday has clarified why I acted so destructively towards you and Mark. He's also assisting me in managing numerous issues like my pregnancy and miscarriage. That's probably a key reason why I spiraled out of control. I'm not sure how much I can offer you. You've obviously progressed a lot, and I'm uncertain about my place in this. It's somewhat akin to a step in the 12-step program. During this session, I intend to admit my wrongdoings to both you and our relationship. Then I'll apologize for each individually and propose to make amends where feasible. This process is part of my journey to forgive myself, so perhaps you might too, if it's possible. The 12-step program is intended for addiction, Cliff noted thoughtlessly. I'm a sex addict, she confessed, looking away. After Mark and I separated, I lost myself in sexual encounters. I spent nearly every night at bars and left with strangers. I became intimate with colleagues, friends, and even my friends' spouses. Anyone who showed a bit of interest likely ended up with me. I drank heavily, and between the alcohol and the transient relationships, I numbed my suffering. Eventually, my parents discovered what was happening and sought help for me. Fortunately, I didn't catch anything that a dose of penicillin couldn't cure. I'm in a much healthier state now. It's been over 3 months since I've been with anyone. Silence filled the room as the weight of her confession registered on my face. Just then, the doctor invited us into his office. This won't be easy, I thought to myself, and I was right. An hour later, we emerged from his office feeling purified and free, an experience I can only describe as an emotional thorough cleansing. Cliff, I really appreciate you coming today, she spoke as we stepped out of the lift. How about we get some coffee or a quick meal? I don't believe that's the best idea. Not at this moment, I answered. Today has been full of too much chaos for me. It's hard to think about how we left things, especially with the way you lost your footing. Maybe we can consider being pals down the line, but today's not the day. I get it, Cliff. I truly do. I hope we can become friends down the road. You're very important to me. As we moved away from the building, she headed east to where her car was parked. Spotting this, I mentioned my car's in the opposite direction, so it looks like this is farewell. Wishing you the best with your recovery, I planted a swift kiss on her cheek and continued on towards the dwindling daylight. June observed his retreating form, somewhat stooped in the brisk November breeze, a sense of sorrow washing over her. A single tear trailed down her face as she witnessed him departing from her world yet again. Dear listeners, I invite you to share your views in the comments section below, and don't forget to hit the like button, share, and subscribe.